It might sound like a broken record at this point, but it's amazing to see just how far Final Fantasy XIV has come since the original launch back in 2010. Now Stormblood, the second expansion for the popular MMO, brings sweeping changes from top to bottom, ranging from an overhauled combat system, massive new zones, plenty of new dungeons and bosses, and a completely reworked PvP system. An overwhelming majority of the new additions and revisions are for the better. There are a few rough spots that will likely be ironed out via upcoming patches. However, Stormblood is an absolutely fantastic expansion that easily eclipses its predecessor, Heavensward, and makes the original A Realm Reborn look like a relic from another generation, despite how phenomenal it was for its time. Stormblood picks up right where Heavensward left off, so players returning after a long absence may find it a bit overwhelming at first. To ease the transition this time around, Square Enix offers paid items to let players boost their characters in order to quickly catch up and immediately enjoy Stormblood. Heavensward was strongly criticized for making players complete outdated content before they could access new additions, so it's good to see the developers listen to the feedback. If you've dismissed Final Fantasy XIV's narrative elements because it's an MMO, you're missing out on a fantastic tale. The writing is top shelf and overshadows many of the other entries in the Final Fantasy series in terms of quality, character development, and nailing the tone of each situation. It may seem daunting to try to catch up, but Stormblood is highly enjoyable as a standalone tale, though there are several payoffs for those who have followed the story thus far. The world itself is also a sight to behold, as each massive new zone contains breathtaking vistas that really highlight what this engine is capable of when unshackled from the restrictions of the last generation. The amount of detail packed into each area is far more elaborate than anything previously seen. There's also the new ability to swim across bodies of water in these zones, and eventually you'll unlock the ability to dive below the waves to traverse massive underwater environments. Although exploring underwater feels more like a novelty, failing to deliver the same thrills as the addition of flight did in the last expansion. One of Final Fantasy XIV's biggest draws is its combat system, but it was becoming increasingly more complex over time. Afraid that combat was becoming too complicated, the developers were driven to reevaluate the entire system and overhaul it in Stormblood. The alterations include the removal of some skills that were no longer useful, the merging of 2 or more skills into a single ability, and the addition of brand new moves for each job. While most of these alterations are for the better, there are some that haven't gone over well with the community. Whether you're playing as a healer, DPS, or tank, each job's rotation and hotbar setup feels less cluttered and simplified, to further improve the accessibility of the combat system. The developers also added a new visual icon called the Job Gauge, which is meant to aid players in combat by providing a quick and easy-to-read visual cue which communicates various details to the player about their actions. For the most part, it works as advertised, but there are a few oversights that the developers have become aware of, promising a future patch to deliver fixes. Stormblood also introduces 2 brand new jobs, Red Mage and Samurai. Both are DPS classes that offer unique playstyles. They're fun to play and are currently very popular, though there is some concern that both jobs are a bit overpowered, so don't be surprised if they see some adjustments in the near future. Perhaps the most controversial change applies to the game's PvP battle system. The PvP modes themselves are mostly unaltered, but the inner workings of how PvP combat plays out is completely new. In an effort to reduce the complicated nature of PvP, the amount of PvP actions have been drastically reduced for each job. Previously, all of your PvE skills would work in PvP along with unique PvP-specific actions that could be enhanced through a skill point system. Now, each job has roughly 9 unique skills, and you can pick 2 additional ones from a pool of universal actions. This greatly reduces the complexity of PvP, allowing it to be more accessible to newcomers. However, this change has been met with some harsh backlash from the PvP community, as the alterations essentially water down long-running strategies and severely reduce the skill ceiling for each job. Though we initially shared this sentiment, our attitude towards these changes is tempered after spending countless hours in matches over the past few weeks. Still, we'll miss the satisfaction gained from executing complex rotations and actions to pull off ridiculous strategies. There's plenty of new content to keep you occupied in Stormblood. The main story quests can take a few days to plow through, even with marathon sessions, though we highly recommend you take your time and enjoy these, as Stormblood weaves a wonderful tale that you shouldn't gloss over. There are also just as many side quests to undertake that feed you experience as you try to level up and keep pace to meet the proper requirements for the next major junction in the game, whether it's unlocking a new zone or dungeon. Stormblood also introduces some of the best dungeons yet. Many of these dungeons are standouts with stellar design and visuals that make for some breathtaking moments. The bosses within each are also something else, several of which throw you into previously unseen situations, while others dazzle with their stellar presentation. However, no matter how unique a dungeon is, they eventually get repetitive after the umpteenth run. Stormblood continues to offer various alternatives to strengthen your characters though, like grinding fates or diving into the Palace of the Dead. What's new is that you can now gain PvE experience through PvP matches, which makes participating feel a bit more worthwhile. There are some unintended consequences from this decision which have caused developers to make adjustments that encourage players to try their best in PvP. However, the decision is a welcome change, especially if you're a DPS used to dealing with disproportionately long queues for dungeons, as you can get into a PvP match almost immediately.
Seize them!
One of the biggest highlights of Stormblood thus far are the two new Primal battles, Susanoo and Laxmi. The story incarnations of both of these Primals, like those that have come before it, aren't meant to be challenging, but rather are there to be enjoyed for the spectacle. Once you've completed Stormblood's story, you can attempt the extreme versions of both Primal fights, but these aren't very challenging when compared to their predecessors. This may come as a disappointment to veterans who are hoping for the initial Primals to offer up something more akin to Titan Hard Mode, or even a fight on par with Ravana Extreme. But this decision was likely made to stay in line with the goal of keeping Stormblood accessible, to appeal to a larger audience. That's not to say the game is a breeze though. The final boss battle of the main story is cause for more than a few headaches. Recently, the first patch unlocked the game's new raid mode, Omega, which relies heavily on Final Fantasy V, with all 4 of the fights based on boss encounters from the classic game. They are a wonderful spectacle to behold, and so far, the storyline is much more improved over its predecessor, Alexander. The initial difficulty setting is meant to be on the easier side so players can complete it to enjoy its storyline. However, the next patch unlocks Savage Mode, which is promised to be the most difficult content in the game. If there's one lingering problem with 14's community, it's the expectation and sometimes borderline sense of entitlement exhibited by some players who have a low threshold for failure when it comes to newcomers. So far, it's still present in Stormblood and probably the one true blemish on an otherwise very positive and helpful online community.
Flesh sundered hath been made whole. Blood spilt runneth through her veins. Breath stolen filleth her breast.
Here's one positive if you end up spending a lot of time getting wiped. You'll be doing it to some pretty amazing music. Stormblood once again features a fantastic soundtrack from the game's composer Masayoshi Soken, with another amazing theme song courtesy of longtime Final Fantasy composer Nobuo Uematsu. Likewise, the game's extensive use of voice work also deserves praise. The cast knocks it out of the park once again and shows why the VO in Final Fantasy XIV is some of the best in the business.
Come now! You've no reason to look so afraid. You have lived through a quarter of a century of Garlean rule, remember?
Though Stormblood had a rocky start during the game's early access period, Square Enix officially placed most of the blame on a massive DDoS attack targeting the game. Once it was addressed, most of the initial woes vanished, though we're still experiencing more disconnects than usual during instanced content. Final Fantasy XIV Online has come a long way since 1.0. Heaven's Ward was an amazing first expansion, but Stormblood outclasses it in just about every regard. It's by no means perfect, but it's off to a very good start. Newcomers have a wide variety of options to jump in and get started, and veterans will be amazed by many of the new changes and alterations to the core experience. Anchored by superb visuals, a fantastic soundtrack, a compelling narrative, tons of side content, and an ever-increasing amount of endgame activities, Stormblood is an amazing expansion that delivers an excellent multiplayer experience. Easy Allies reviews are made possible by generous viewers just like you. If you like what you see, check out patreon.com/easyallies to see our other videos, and consider becoming a patron to help us make more.